Hi, good evening, and thank you for joining us for day 206 at GGY. So we are here on a usual Wednesday roundtable, and our group is here. So we have Damaris, Pearlie, Anjali, Yasmin, Manik, Chris, Auntie Maubrey, and Lisha, and also Chiranta. Thank you so much for joining us today. But we also have a very, very special guest today. We have Salia Pires, President's Counsel. Sorry, he's going to do a little intro on the video. Yeah. So, Salia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So let me quickly read your Wikipedia page out as an introduction. So Salia is a President's Counsel and former President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. I think you served 2 terms as the President. You began your career as a prosecutor in the Attorney General's Department, and later you served as the first chairman of the Office of Missing Persons from February 2018 till September 2020. And I think before that, you were also member of the Human Rights Commission from 2015 to 2018, right? So that's what your Wikipedia page says. So also you've been named Person of the Year by LND magazine in 2022, right? Sri Lankan of the Year. Sri Lankan of the Year. And the Hindu newspaper highlighted your role in the Sri Lankan protests, basically stating that you were a voice of reason that ensured citizens' constitutional sort of rights and freedoms when you were the president of the BASL. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
No, not at all. I think we were really looking forward to speaking to you. As you can see, we have a far more active participation today. So Sali, to get started, let me just ask you to maybe give you an opportunity to clear up any common misconceptions that people might have about you, on the legal profession, and your time at the BASL. Maybe you can set the record straight on things that generally sort of being spoken about. For example, you represented Harakata, and then people on social media started piling on, saying, "Oh, this is the great defender of freedom, defending a criminal, and so on." Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about, shed some light on the importance of legal due process and the equal application of the law regardless of who the client is. Also, do you believe there is such a thing as equal justice in this country? And we see that petty crimes are prosecuted, but sort of major crimes and scams and things like that, we see cases being released almost on a daily basis. Chris actually has a laundry list which he reads out at the end of every time we do something like this. So is there something that you would like to clarify? Or?
Yeah, so misconception, probably I will answer those if there is a specific question. But on justice, so there is a need to, we need to ensure that there is rule of law. So rule of law also necessarily involves that the law gives people protection and that there is due process. So sometimes whether we might not like certain people, or we might think that they are criminals, but even the worst criminal is entitled to due process, and that is how civilized countries work. And so in that context, the right of representation, that a person has a right to be represented, right to be defended in court, and also apart from being defended, a person should have equal access to justice. Your question of whether there is equal access to justice, of course, I would say that is work in progress. We cannot say that everything is perfect. Obviously, it's not. In no legal system, even in the best of countries, are things perfect. So there is in the 18th century, Jonathan Swift, he has said laws are like cobwebs, where the small insects get caught, but the big go free. So that was in the 18th century England, how Jonathan Swift saw the law. But we have to change that. We have to ensure that 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 the protection of the law is fair, and not only people, shall we say, the petty criminals get caught in the process, but also that those that the law applies equally across the board. Now, but in that process, we also have to see that justice, that there is the right of access. We have to ensure that police excesses are not tolerated. So you asked about a criminal on whose behalf I had filed a writ application. So in that case related to where there was a fear, where his father feared that he would be killed in police custody. Now why are we against custodial deaths? Because when you give the police control over lives of people, firstly, we don't know whether that person is guilty or not. Secondly, a person's life can be taken away only by due process, that is through a court case, and punished because by punishment by a court. We don't want a sub-inspector of police to decide on the innocence or the guilt of a person. Because the risk of that is, today it might be a person who the public thinks it's a criminal. Tomorrow the police will kill someone and then say that he had a hand grenade or so on. For instance, I won't mention the specific case where it's an ongoing case. There was an instance where a young person was shot by the police and he survived. And the allegation is that the police hoisted weapons on him. Right? But how the media and the police portrayed it was that as he was trying to throw a grenade, that he was shot by the police.
Right.
As a practitioner, I have seen this happening over the years, how police sometimes falsely implicate people. So that is why due process is needed.
Right. So we see these extrajudicial killings all the time, right? I mean, especially drug dealers and all of that. We see them sort of, I mean, these are almost like executions, right? So by you representing him, that high profile brings a certain amount of light to the case, so that affords him some protection. Is that the
No. It is that irrespective of a person's profile, a person is entitled to due process. He may be whoever he is, whether he is a person who is termed a criminal or any person is entitled to due process. And I, for one, I have consistently opposed custodial deaths. Because firstly, the police should not have such a power. In a civilized country, that cannot happen. You cannot allow the police to decide on it. I'll give you an example. 2010, there was a case from Ambilipitiya where a man was arrested by an inspector of police. He was taken into custody. He was taken away to the police station, brought home in a day or two. His mother's sister who was there was told, you better feed him, this will be his last meal. And then that night, that was a Saturday night, he was shot. He was shot and killed. In fact, the agency department defended the police. In this case, appeared in the fundamental rights application. Ultimately, we went to court, we got the body exhumed, got the body sent to another judicial medical officer, and they found evidence of torture. And ultimately, the Supreme Court held that the death was a violation of fundamental death, and also the injuries which had been caused before was a violation of fundamental rights. And the Supreme Court observed that the police, when they take a person into, it was the usual encounter killing, saying that he tried to take a weapon and tried to grab a weapon, and
some excuses.
Yeah, and then he was shot through the head. And ultimately, the Supreme Court ordered the state and the respondents to pay 2 million compensation. But the fact is that is an example. The family swears that this was a personal enmity which resulted in the killing. The police say he was wanted for some crimes, and they termed him underworld. Right? But the question is, we do not know, because how do we know whether that is true? And that can only be tested in a court of law by cross-examination. Of course, that is not to say that everything is foolproof. Sometimes in our systems, not only in our system, all over the world, sometimes the guilty might go free. And also the reverse happens. Sometimes the innocent might get convicted. You know, in the countries of the US, UK, we had innocent people being convicted and years later released from prison. So I'm sure in our legal system also that happens, but we don't have a process of reviewing that. So that is why I say, as far as possible, we must try to promote the rule of law, ensure justice, access to justice is important. And of course, we know that there is a gap, because if you are between the people who have and have not, there is a gap for access to justice, because justice is not always affordable to people, and that must be corrected.
Are there state defenders?
There in Sri Lanka system, we have a system of assigning counsel in the High Court. In the High Court, so if a person does not have, cannot afford, they assign a counsel. Assigned counsel is paid something like 5,000 rupees or 7,500 rupees for the entire case. But that's a way also for young lawyers to train. But then, of course, the thing is, sometimes you train at the expense of the litigant. So that whereas somebody who can afford will be able to retain a more seasoned practitioner. So that gap is. We don't have a public defender's office as such.
But now in recent cases, Sali, we've seen people being arrested under SCCPR active especially, and there is no presumption of innocence, right? Because they can be held, and generally the act of holding somebody in detention is almost like a punishment. They've been held indefinitely. How is that possible in a
yeah? So again, we have certain special laws like the PTA, the ICCPR Act, where the bail provisions are more stringent. So if you take the PTA, the original PTA allowed for the President, for the Minister of Defence to detain a person up to 18 months. Then subsequently last year it was amended, now it's up to 12 months. Then after that, when the accused is produced in court, the rule is he will be held in remand till the end of the trial. Now, of course, again 2022 there were some amendments which allows for bail after a period of time. But I have come across accused who have been 10 years in remand and then been acquitted of the case. One person whom I defended, he was charged under the PTA. He was a major in the army. His son was 1 year when he went in. When he came out, the son was 11 years. So that's a PTA. So then again, the ICCPR, the original intention of the ICCPR was probably good to prevent hate speech, so on. But we have seen it being abused, and the police use it selectively. And so that is why a very important decision came from the High Court on how this must be looked at. So one of our country's problems is that laws are misused by law enforcement, and of course politicians also misuse. I don't know, some of you might know that there was under the PTA many years ago, there was a famous Sri Lankan singer who was detained under the PTA.
Personal vendetta. No? That was a
personal vendetta. Because there was a minister who had there was a personal animosity or a relationship, and he was detained under the PTA. So that is one
famous case.
Famous case, and the minister concerned was a highly respected minister. But
We'll talk about that later. So,
just one thing, I just don't know whether I heard you correctly. Did you say that a major general was held under the PTA?
No, an army major.
An army major was held under the PTA?
No, under the PTA, because the allegation was that he had collaborated with the yes, but everything was based on a confession, which was thrown out by court, and ultimately 10 years after his arrest, he was acquitted.
So last week we had Ijaz, he was a PTA detainee himself. We actually asked him whether he knows how many people are currently held under the PTA. Do you know how many are?
I don't know. I'm also not aware of the exact number. But I think now the numbers, there are hardly any people detained under detention orders. But there will be people who have cases, cases under the PTA who are in remand custody until the conclusion of the trial. But I suppose, I believe the numbers are smaller, but there would be people still
under that. So is there anything else from the group about specifically, misconceptions about Salia, like, things that people say about him during his time at BASL? Is there anything specific, or we move on? Move on? Nothing else. Okay. So, just want to talk to you, Sali, about safeguarding democracy and voting rights. I mean, that was something that was very common when we asked the group to, come up with questions for you. Elections are crucial to democracy, and right now we've seen the local government elections being postponed, and possibly there's no real word about the presidential elections either, right? I mean, there was a court order saying that the election should, the local government especially,
ordering them to
should proceed, right? So, I mean, what kind of moment are we in terms of, I mean, is this like an existential moment for us?
I would want to talk about an existing case because I am counsel. I'm counsel for the Elections Commission.
Right.
But today the Supreme Court granted leave to proceed. A divisional bench of the Supreme Court granted leave to proceed in two matters relating to the non-holding of the local authority elections. And the cases were fixed for October, for 4 consecutive days in October for argument. But that is the status of the cases. In one case, the Supreme Court issued an interim order to release funds, but so far that order has not been complied with.
Isn't that contempt?
So that there is a contempt matter filed before court. So again,
I don't want to comment. But broadly,
what I do say is elections are necessary, and that is the law. The law is that you have periodical elections. The executive should not be allowed to stop elections because that sets a very dangerous trend. Today it will be the local authority elections. What if one day the executive decides that we don't have funding for presidential elections?
Exactly.
Or for parliamentary elections. Then what are we going to do? Are we just going to say no? So the funds have to be found. There is no question where elections are concerned. Allowing the executive to postpone elections at the whims and fancies of the executive. Then you must amend the law, bring in legislation allowing for a postponement on reasonable grounds. The law must be amended. But I think Sri Lanka's history, we saw in 1970, 70 to 75, the election should have been held in 75. But because the 72 constitution came into effect, elections were postponed in 77. Then we saw the infamous referendum where parliamentary elections were postponed. And we all know that every time elections have been tampered with, there have been repercussions for the country. And very deadly, shall we say, deadly repercussions for the country. So allowing the Supreme Court has given a number of decisions about this, about postponement of elections. Justice Mahapada and Justice Presadep on postponement of elections. So I think
so the only remedy is legal, isn't it? I mean, there's no other remedy other than what these cases that are going on.
I suppose the only remedy is the legal remedy.
Because people are not allowed to protest anymore. So the voices of the people have now been sort of sidelined.
But I must say this. I say this. There are two segments, I think, who should voice their views, who are not. One is the corporate sector.
100%.
One is the corporate sector. We saw the corporate sector issuing a lot of statements during the height of the Aragale. But we did not see the corporate sector issuing statements on holding of elections. And that is where the people of this country should pressurize the corporate sector to do that. The corporate sector did not come out during the early stages of the economic crisis either. It was only when it reached its height that the corporate sector became vocal. So similarly, I have a complaint against the corporate sector to say that they are not talking sufficiently of pressuring the government on preservation of democracy, especially the conduct of elections. The other is the international community. Again, I think, it is my view that institutions like the diplomats, but also like the IMF and the World Bank, there is no purpose of just ticking the boxes and having, saying governance. You must actually ensure that democracy is preserved. When you speak to people representing the IMF, they say, well, that is not our mandate. But there is no purpose of talking of good governance in Sri Lanka without looking at democracy.
And I think in the IMF agreement itself, in the main body of the agreement, there's an anti-corruption clause.
Yes.
But there's no clause regarding sort of human fundamental rights.
No, I believe there is reference to rule of law,
Right.
or I think more governance. There was going to be a governance, what they call a governance diagnostic being carried out.
Yeah.
But
September they are
supposed to be. But so I do feel that there must be many diplomats say that they are quietly persuading, but I think that is not sufficient. They need to be vocal on Sri Lanka's democracy.
Right.
Because we know that whenever the democracy has stalled, so for instance under Jayawardena, we know up to 1982, 82 he won the presidential election. Then after that he came up with this infamous Naxalite plot where people like Vijay Kumaratunga were arrested and detained. And we know after that, with the banning of the JB, we know how the country situation deteriorated.
Yeah. So actually that kind of goes into our next question, which might overlap a little bit with what we've already spoken about. So in the face of an increasingly authoritarian executive president and a majority-backed parliament, so they have all the votes they need to pass any kind of legislation in parliament, although the public mandate doesn't seem to be there. I mean, we as a group, we agree with everything you say about the corporate community and the international community. In this climate, do you feel the judiciary can play a bigger role, a more activist role in this manner? Because generally, activists like us, we are interested in outcomes.
Right.
So we are more about slogans, right? I mean, people in the system has to figure out the steps to get us to that outcome.
Yeah. So shall we put it this way? In a lot of public speeches I make, I give two examples of how our judiciary conducted itself. It was 1981 during the Kalawana, what is known as the Kalawana by-election. So the background to that was we had a Chief Justice, Neville Samarkar. He was appointed directly to the office of Chief Justice by Prime Minister J.R. Jayawardena, the Prime Minister. When the Chief Justice's post fell vacant in 77, Neville Samarkar was a practitioner, he was a leading Queen's Counsel. He was appointed directly as Chief Justice. Now, when he was appointed, in fact, they overlooked the most senior Supreme Court judge, Justice Samaravikrama, and appointed him. Neville Samarkar turned out to be one of the best Chief Justices we had. So when the Kalawana by-election issue came, what happened there was a member of Parliament for Kalawana who was ousted on an election petition. Then, knowing that he was going to be ousted, he absented himself from Parliament for 3 months. And then, with the change of constitution, they did away with by-elections, and the party could nominate an MP. So he was absent for 3 months. The UNP nominated him again as MP for Karnataka. Meantime, election petition went ahead, and the court held that the original election in 77 was void, and it said that the MP should be unseated. There was a by-election nominated. So what did this MP go and do? He went to the speaker and he said, look, I was elected in 77, but I am now sitting in Parliament not by virtue of my election, but because I was appointed by the UNP. So the court may have unseated me, but allowed me to be in Parliament, and the speaker allowed him to take his seat in Parliament. Now the Elections Commissioner at that time, it was Mr. Piyasekara, he said, no, I'm going ahead with having the Kalawana by-election because I have been ordered by court to do so. I'm going, and he went ahead with holding the by-election. Then President Jayawardena Now he was wondering what to do. Then he came up with a solution. He said, now let us, Kalamana, let us increase the number of MPs from 1 to 2. So we know that they had 5-6 majority. They brought in what is called the third amendment to the constitution and said for the seat of Kalamana, there shall be 2 MPs. So one elected and by-election, the other who was nominated and allowed to remain despite the verdict of the election commission. So that bill was challenged before the Supreme Court. And a 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court heard this. It was really on the day after Christmas in 1981. And in fact, it was Surya Vikramasinghe. She was the secretary, I think, of the civil rights movement who was challenging. In fact, recently when I wrote something on Facebook about it, she told me that it was she who had been representing the petition. She was a junior counsel representing the petitioner. The Supreme Court said, you are trying to have 2 members only for Kalamana. That violates the franchise. That violates the sovereignty of the people. If you want to bring this amendment, you have to pass it through a referendum. So obviously the government couldn't have a referendum throughout the country just for that. Then Jaya Jayawardena backed down. And the particular MP, Abheratna Pilapitiya, resigned. By that time the by-election was held. Sarath Mukta took his seat in Parliament. Yes. So that is one example. The second example was more recent example, 2018, when Maithripala Sirisena dissolved Parliament. The Chief Justice was Justice Nalin Perera, appointed 1 month before by Maithripala Sirisena. Actually, Mr. Nalin Perera was number 6 in the Supreme Court. So for Maithripala Sirisena went down the line for the reason that at that point the contest for the Chief Justice was between the most senior Supreme Court judge and the Attorney General. And Maithripala Sirisena opted to appoint the most senior career judge of the Supreme Court, who was number 6. Justice Nalin Perera was appointed as Chief Justice. Now within the month, the dissolution case came. And what did Chief Justice Nalin Perera do? Cases were filed before him, came up before him on that particular Monday. Friday, I think Saturday or Friday or Saturday, Parliament was dissolved. Monday, the cases were filed. It was 3 judges, Justice Priyanka Jayawardena and Justice Prasanna Jayawardena on the bench. The Attorney General came and asked for time. The judges said, you want time? We give you time till afternoon, 1:30. And the court heard it. That evening, the court issued a stay order, staying the dissolution. And within 1 month, the case was heard, concluded, and the dissolution, a 7-judge bench of the Supreme Court set aside the dissolution and said that was a violation of fundamental rights. So, I will say, I will give those 2 examples. I will say that is what is expected. And Sri Lanka judiciary has had a history from the time of brace girdle, where the courts have acted decisively. And I think it would be fair to say that the public continues to have the expectation that the courts of this country would do what it has historically done. And I would stop at that.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we won't press you further on that since you're already involved in some cases in this matter. So can I just take you back to your tenure as the president of the BASL? There were some rumors that you were for the people in that particular instance. The lawyers turned out in numbers so many times, right? They formed human chains, and they were sometimes right in front of the water cannons as well. That overt sort of support for the Argale, did that have a bearing on you not contesting for the BASL presidency again? Or 2 terms is basically all you
BASL constitution allows only 2 terms, so I finished my term. So I have no intention of seeking a constitutional amendment for
right.
So that my term.
Okay. No, because that is something that is often said, right? Like we've heard it. That maybe that has an impact on you. So
no,
it's a technical matter.
It's a technical matter, and also what I do believe is in any institution that people leadership must change,
right?
Because otherwise he gets nailed there.
Right.
And so that is the whole reason.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, our politicians don't have the same
Same view, yeah, sadly. Even a few days ago, Sali, we saw that there were commemorations for Black July and so on, and it was not allowed to go ahead. I mean, they used various pretexts to break these protests up. Anytime the student unions or the trade unions get on the street, they are absolutely hammered. There's no other way of describing it. I think we are probably one of the few groups that is still left to protest unmolested, which is actually why we are continuing to do it, because it's a right we need to demonstrate. But we don't see the active participation of the BASL even in condemnation or the way they stood out or the way you spoke out during the Argale anymore. Right, exactly. You were vocal. We saw you front and center. I mean, I think we don't see that active participation anymore. Even when something as egregious as what happened a few days ago, where it's a clear violation of something.
Of course, to be fair, I think on certain key issues like the Prevention of Terrorism Act, on the Anti-Terrorism Act, on custodial deaths, so on, the BASL has intervened, has issued statements. The BASL challenged the anti-corruption bill. BASL was one of the petitioners who challenged the anti-corruption bill. So I don't think beyond that it is for me to explain. I don't think I can answer any questions on that.
Right.
But I think the bar historically also has always taken a position, and I believe it will continue to take a position on matters related to rule of law, independence of the judiciary.
I suppose this is more of a statement then, that we don't see the active participation that we saw under your definition.
I cannot.
I understand.
But to say that, I think I must also say this, that whatever during my term, whatever was done was not mine alone.
Sure.
And it was there were hundreds of lawyers who got involved, and especially I must say many junior lawyers. And it was on their own.
Right. I mean, whenever there was a case, there were literally 100 lawyers turning up for each case. I mean, it was amazing to see.
For instance, Mirihana.
Right.
Mirihana, it was a spontaneous reaction. It was not that we organized or we asked lawyers to come, but hundreds of lawyers went there.
I mean, you referred to 2018. I think the Supreme Court, I think you mentioned this. Supreme Court, I think, could get a little bit of spine because the way the people reacted to that particular event, right? I mean, people saw that this was a grave injustice. People actually protested against. A lot of us, were protesting against what happened to Ranil Wickremesinghe, right? In that particular instance, and I think activists got a lot of backbone from the fact that lawyers were turning up for them, right? I mean, I think it gave a lot of courage to people to say, okay, you know what, we're going to go and stand up for our rights because we know we are going to have that layer of protection, which is lacking now. Would you agree? I mean, as a group, we find, I mean, so maybe but that is one of the reasons we don't see the numbers.
But it's also this, I think, even now, there will be a legal representation where whenever there is an incident, so we have seen when people are arrested, see lawyers to appear. May not be the same numbers. Also, one reason is, I suppose that same mood is not there in the country. That same, because at the height of in March, April, May, or up to July, the mood of the country was also such, and that it reflected that. I think that so the lawyers also reflected the mood of the country. So now perhaps it is more, shall we say, I'm not too sure whether the public opinion has changed, but maybe the public approach has changed, and one can't expect the public also to continue demonstrating in the same way for years and years. And that won't happen in any people's movement. And in history, I think there are ups and downs. And they also that when Trump was elected, Obama came on TV and he said, history doesn't travel in a straight line. History doesn't travel in a straight line, it zigzags. So that is, I think, that is how we must look at it.
Are we zigging or zagging right now?
That is.
Well, just want to.
But also not that what I say want to say is that neither should we be discouraged.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I just wanted to add on that. Now, sorry, I've been fighting for rights like from 2015 in the public domain. Now, before that, I was writing the papers and things like that. So, when I see this, what I see is now when we take a incident, it peaks at the very beginning, and at the middle it starts to drop, and that's the hardest time, and then when people realize certain things, the powerful people, the people who can actually do something, then they get involved at the third stage. Like the second stage is the drop.
Yeah.
The first stage is the outrage, drop. Then the middle ground. It's systematic. Even when you take so many other instances and incidents.
Argalaya also.
Even
right after the cabinet resigned, there was a dip. Remember, there was people going to GGG was lessened, and then it built up. By July 9th, it built up into a.
So for instance, early July, I used to drive past there. I used to go to drop my daughter in school. And when you drive past there, sometimes in the early morning at about 6:30, only about handful were there.
Yeah.
So, but also that is how history is. So people, there will be ups and downs. But I think those who are determined that these things must change, we must continue to persevere.
For example, I just want to say that if you take it on social media, even if you take a Aragale based for justice team, there's a huge reaction. There's a huge base still there. Hundreds and thousands of people are still watching those videos. That means the people are there. While they might not come out to the street and
and a lot of them reminisce. Like Indresh, right? Time to time, share stuff.
Yeah.
So people have some a fond kind of a recollection.
They know what
about
that
it.
is. They know the path now.
Yeah.
People know the path. It's just that they are not actively there, but it's a matter of time.
Also, there's a bit of weariness also.
There's a bit of the scared. People are a bit afraid because of this persecution, and some companies are the corporate sector. Some corporate sectors are pressurizing, don't go to protest, I don't want you seen in our uniform, or I don't want you seen there, like that, the management is coming down. These are things, that needs to be, vocaled out, singled out with the name, told in public, and they let them tackle it.
Yeah. We've had members drop out because companies told them not to.
Yeah.
We've had members drop out. Companies told them not to.
Those
Is
company
that-
names, they should be.
Is that, can a company do that? Can a private citizen not to?
Well, technically no.
No, right.
But I suppose as long as it's not during the company time or during or in company uniform, that might be. Yeah.
Someone told me in their letter of appointment, it says that they can't represent these anti-government things. Is that legal?
No, I don't think. I think, but the only problem here again is this: an employee who signs a contract will hardly have any space to negotiate with the person, with the company employee, and say, "Can you delete this? Can you delete that?"
Right, exactly.
But we as the people, we need to voice out against that type of system. That is a very unethical, inhumane system.
And also because of the economic crisis, also I think people will be frightened about losing their jobs. So also, I think we have
There is
to.
more that
The
companies
corporate
don't
sector
come
must-
out and say don't go.
Yeah.
They do say not to wear the uniform.
Yeah.
But
But also, I think companies also now when you talk to people in the corporate sector, one thing they say is, I have been asking people, why didn't you all come out during the economic crisis early? So we know that sometimes they look after their interests,
Yeah.
and sometimes they fear that if they do take a public position, that their business interests will suffer, and that there are many ways the powers that be can harass them. So,
Well, when the host economy is suffering, companies are recording profits. and good profits, not just, and the market is doing well. So
I mean,
there's definitely a two-tier system.
Yeah,
working.
I mean that's the main companies, like
Yeah.
the top tier companies,
Yeah.
but the middle class, middle
But
companies are falling apart.
but the thing is, Chirant, in our system, they have an oversized influence on what happens in politics, right? So
That's
if you look at the media and so on,
I mean-
so they can change.
Yeah, actually, I think if you look at the
Perception.
businesses which have closed, the people who have lost jobs, then even the people who have had to cut down on their meals.
And migration.
and-
Yeah.
1 million migration.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that's going to be hard for us to recover from, right? So can I move on to the next topics? You brought it up briefly about the anti-corruption bill. I think 119 amendments, I think the ones you mentioned, have been made to that particular bill. And but we as a group are still not 100% clear about exactly what is in this. I mean, whistleblower protections we hear is not there or not sufficient, and also whether this can be applied retroactively to past crimes, because I think that is something that we are concerned about, especially all the scams and all the the mass sort of transfer of wealth from the public to the private to private hands. So is there any clarification that you can give us on that?
Yeah, so I think the anti-corruption bill, when you look at it overall, I think it has its positives. It has its positives. I was counsel for the BSL. We challenged it, but there were some important things not included. So, for instance, the president was not included in the definition of public officials. So
he was above the law.
Yeah, so it may have been even it may have been accidental for that matter. So we do not know. Readily the state agreed. that we will include the president. So there were certain drawbacks, but at the same time, I think the problem is not in the legislation. The problem will be how the legislation will be implemented. You can have a nice set of laws, but if it is not, so now the next crucial question will be who will be those who are appointed to the new anti-corruption commission. Will it be those who are independent, those who are competent, those who will take forward the anti-corruption agenda, or you can appoint, the Constitutional Council can recommend and the President can appoint a set of people who will not be effective. So we have all these independent commissions, but everything depends on the people who are appointed. If proper people are appointed, people are strong, who are competent, but also our financial structure is such that still the government can choke these commissions, right?
Funding.
Yes, because the funding, employment, because we have this structure of where you have to obtain permission from the management services department for staffing. The people in there, the management services department don't understand the requirements of the institution. So I for one, I welcome this law, but we have to see how it is going to be applied and implemented, and that would be really the test. And that is where our issues we are talking of governance comes in. I think everything what is wrong with Sri Lanka is the lack of strong institutions, and institutions have been systematically been weakened, and the present executive also continues to do that, to weaken institutions. And if you don't strengthen the institutions, we will be back here in a few years discussing what went wrong with Sri Lanka.
Right. So
Election Commission is a good example.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. I think that most of the institutions are weak and the implementation is wrong, that they do whatever they want because the people are not engaged. The people don't care, somebody walks away with the garlic scan, somebody walks away with the sugar scan, somebody walks away with the, the bond scan. I mean, people are just, the people need to understand, and you take United States, George Floyd, one person being killed by an officer, the entire country came out, no, irrespective of race or religion, the entire country came out. Even if you take that Truss in UK, who became the Prime Minister, she completely ruined the state policy, and the people came to say, get out. And when she left, the pound came down to 1.07 or something, but it came back, now it's at 1.3. You see, this is the way the people have to.
Well, so Chiranta, I think that the Argale represented that engagement, and I think everything we see now is to stop people from being engaged. We see all the distractions, we see all the laws that have been coming in. I mean, if you look at the legislative agenda, what has been accomplished in Parliament up to now, it really hasn't been to address the economic issues. Yes, a couple of things like the Central Bank Act and the IMF. I mean, those were like absolutely necessary anyway. But beyond that, of course, now the anti-corruption bill will, if you have faith in it, then I guess we can have faith in it.
I guess he has very clear.
I qualified it.
Yeah, one did qualify.
Certain parts.
Certainly what
But
happened.
do you know if it's retrospective?
No, it's not.
It's not.
No.
You can't have it.
No, you cannot. It would not be. In the sense, the offences are not with retrospective effect. But Sri Lanka already we have a bribery. We have a bribery act.
Yeah.
And the bribery act has provisions. Maybe we should have some new laws relating to stolen assets to enable the recovery of stolen assets.
But that's not in this.
No, that is not in this. So for instance, in certain European countries now they have a civil procedure, civil process to recover assets.
But tell me now, with the current composition of this parliament, my question is, why would they vote for an act that is against their own self-interest? Right? I mean, ultimately, we know, we can give examples of who's corrupt and the reasons that, we have convicted felons and even a murdering parliament and so on. So, without like an election and a properly mandated government, can we place any trust in this institution to actually guide these laws to a place where that, we can have faith in them?
So unfortunately, our constitution is such we don't have the power of recall. So elections will be due in 2025. The presidential election will be due by between September and October 2024.
Yeah.
So we have to manage with what we have.
Power of recall remains with the power of people.
Yeah, but
No, that's not there in the constitution.
yes, I mean it's not there in the constitution.
Not
So
in the
I
constitution.
in fact
No, other thing is, other than, you displace the president, but you can't displace the entire parliament without
No
an
one's talking
election.
about the abolishing of the actual
Executive
president,
president, which is one of the
high
main.
up on our list last year.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, the Bar Association proposals also pointed to eventually abolishing the executive presidency.
Right.
And I think that the executive presidency is a major many
All
problems.
our problems.
Many of our problems.
No
Right.
independence is there.
That's
in the
right.
commission.
So do you think until there is a change, of course a change in the constitution is maybe like a bigger discussion. I think that is something that we as a group have talked about many times, and we actually subscribe to the view that maybe we need a new constitution. Do you think we can address issues of transitional justice? Right? I think you and Sia spoke about this as well. With this current composition, is that realistic?
Yeah, so on my view on what we call this transitional justice or reconciliation is there is a gap. There is a gap on what is say between the north and the south. There is a gap. You have to convince the majority community also of the need for this process for this process of reconciliation to take place. So, for instance, take the missing. There is definitely an issue of the missing. We know that not only in the north, but we know during JB time also, tens of thousands of people went missing. In the north and east, I have met families representing from all communities. The Tamils, the Muslims, the Sinhalese, where people have disappeared. Now that has to be addressed. Now, how we are trying to address it is, there are a lot of people who think if you issue a certificate of absence and give some compensation, that will meet the requirement. But having spoken to some of those families, I know that what they want to know is what happened. Because for them, when one of your loved ones is missing, there is that
No closure.
No closure. It's worse than someone dying.
Yeah.
Then you know.
Not knowing.
Not knowing.
Yeah.
So in fact, I shared this on Facebook. A particular lady met me. Her husband had disappeared during the 83 riots. So that is 35 years ago. She met me in 2018, and she said she's from Yatiyantoda. They come to the Kovil in Colombo. Yes, and then they got separated. He never returned. So she said, I don't want money. She said, I'm not coming for money. My daughter is in Dubai. She sends me money. She said, I still wear the red potto. And that is a sign of the married Hindu lady. And she said, I must remove the potto if he's dead. But I want to find out what really happened. So this, what I want to say is, not everyone in the south is convinced of this need. And so that gap, I think we have to make people understand. So not only there are 5,100 people missing from the armed forces. So we need to bridge the gap and to show that reconciliation is needed for this country to move on.
But
So
to do that,
part of the process is also accountability. There are emblematic cases which have to be addressed for some ongoing cases. There are some ongoing cases also of disappearances. Those need to be addressed. Without addressing those, you are not going to achieve a true unity. But for that, you need to convince
the majority.
Also,
But the thing is, Salia, you have.
There are some people in denial.
Well, also you have people trafficking in racism and nationalism, right? Especially for political gain.
Yes.
So in that climate, that's why I said with the current composition with the Pohutwa majority, who use the Easter bombings as a vehicle to obtain power, and this 2/3 majority and all of them. I mean, now we know the circumstances behind that particular election, right? I mean, I think it's clearer, although there is no accountability or justice. Justice for Easter bombings is one of the things that us as a group have been talking about. Is that a realistic expectation that we can keep people, that they will be able to get that closure with the current composition? I mean, don't you think an election would be the most clarifying thing?
I do think that if we are to truly change, there must be a government which has a real mandate, which has a mandate from the people. And I think the sooner that mandate is obtained, the better. Chiranta was talking of public participation. Now, I also have a question. For instance, we know how the debt restructuring, I don't know, we call it debt optimization happened. Now, we know that prejudices the EPF.
Yes.
And that someone who is a member of the EPF who may have been entitled to a higher percentage will get a lower percentage. But I really know, and we know how the DDR, the resolutions were passed. Wednesday, it was put to cabinet. Friday, it was put to parliament. Saturday, debated and voted upon. And only Monday, it was made public. Now, I must say, I was also amazed at the lack of interest in many countries. If such a thing happened, without public consultation, without at least public being made aware. How it happened, that there would have been public concern. But I really don't know whether even now those who are the employees in the private sector who are really affected by this, whether they understand the repercussions.
Yes.
I don't think
Even
they
they do,
know. Most people don't know.
They were made aware of the comments.
That's right.
I mean,
Yes.
this is the thing. Roshan Chamikar, I think he died. Roshan Chamikar.
Roshan
Chanaka died in the earlier time when the Rajapakshas tried to meddle with the EPF funds. I mean, the problem here is what I feel is that, the opposition that is supposed to be, on the street with the people are in front of mics making press conferences and, going to political rallies and saying how the things are, so, I mean, giving Thada speeches, like very grand speeches they are giving. I mean, in action they are not on the road with the people, I mean, facilitating the, objective, opposition to these type of things. They are not doing that. I mean, are we supposed to be, take a, board and go and stand? No, the opposition has to, coordinate this. The opposition is, sideline talking about,
and they're not even united.
They are not divided. The opposition, the opposition of this country is divided. They are trying to attack the Pertugami trying to attack the jet pass. They are trying to split the leftism parties. Now these other parties are.
That started, Chiranta, because they sniffed an election coming, the local government, right? That's when when the opposition started clashing with each other,
the
right?
people of this country have given a clear signal that the people of this country are united. The politicians of this country should also stop meddling and dancing, and they should get together and say, we are the opposition, this is the policies we stand for, we will stand for these. That's a common ground they have to make. What are they doing?
I think, the people are not still people are unsure and not fully aware of what really happened. It was like a rug just taken under there. One thing that stuck in my mind was, and I keep thinking about it, is I think a media personality asked a central bank governor, how is it that the provident fund of the central bank will earn, which is managed by them, for their own employees, will earn an interest of 25%, while the custodians for the EPF, I think, is the central bank.
Yes.
One of the custodians
It's paying
it will be paying 9%, and the central bank chairman was there defending that position.
The governor.
The governor, right? So that's the time that I thought, hey, it's something untoward is happening here. But imagine, majority will not even, that might not even go into the
They don't
system.
understand it. Even the people who are working, they are not concerned about how much interest I am getting on EPA.
Yeah, because what
Yeah,
happens
because
is
Maybe the people who can speak, like the business leaders and all who are speaking, they are not affected. Majority of the banks are not affected.
They are not affected at all.
So they are staying quiet,
I'm not I don't have any expertise on this, but I know that there are those who say that the distribution should have been more equitable.
Yes.
And so, for instance, private bondholders don't have to face the same music as the EPF.
Nothing, only EPF was affected because they are voiceless people.
That's right.
And even the EPF department management did not know this was happening. They didn't know.
And also, I think there is also a conflict there, because on one hand it is a central bank which governs the EPF, but on the other hand it is also the central bank which took the decision.
Yes.
So
there was no equality in that at all.
Yeah, we are kind of like reaching the time. So just what we normally do, Salih, is that we take the news of the week and we talk about it. That's what we normally do. So there are a couple of things that Leisure has picked out for us to maybe just get your thoughts on. Ranil Wickremesinghe pardoned LTT cadres this week, and then we saw Maithripala Sirisena's pardon of the Royal Park murderers. He is a convicted murderer. Right?
Yeah.
Convicted murderer, and he pardoned him, and Supreme Court has said the pardon was illegal.
No. The court has not yet decided on it. The court is judgment has been reserved. It has not yet given a decision.
Right. So the timing of this pardon of the LTTE, the central bank bombers, is there significance to that?
So again, the president's powers of pardon.
Yeah.
I think over the years, the man. I for one, I believe that the president must have the power to pardon,
Right.
because that is historically in many other countries.
Yeah.
But here the problem is, I think, the presidents of Sri Lanka, multiple presidents, some of the pardons that even have been problematic.
Right.
So, for instance, under President Jayawardena, there was a famous man called Gonavala Sunil who was given a pardon, and that was extremely problematic. And so, but every president. So I know in one instance there was a wife of a minister who was convicted for double murder, and she was given a pardon. Of course, it was couched in such a way that President Mahinda Rajapaksa gave a pardon to all women over 60 in prison on International Women's Day.
Okay.
So it seemed very sort of a nice gesture.
Yes, but then he slipped into that with this lady as well.
That this lady also got a pardon.
Okay.
So the power of pardon are problematic. And now that is before the Supreme Court in two cases, one in the Silva's case and the other in the Royal Park. So let's wait for the decision of the Supreme Court to see how things pan out.
Okay, and the other story that Disha has highlighted is Nama requesting an acquittal from the
From
court
that 30 million.
on a case. I mean,
Money laundering.
can anybody do that? Can
No,
Disha
no.
request an acquittal?
In any criminal litigation,
Yeah.
when the prosecution closes, the defense can make an application saying that the case is not proved and ask for a acquittal. So again, I want to say this. This is where a lot of members of the public think when a high-profile case comes before court that those people must be convicted. But the courts have to act on evidence. And if the evidence is insufficient, the judge has to acquit. I'm not talking, I don't want to talk of a particular case,
Right.
a case
But I can remember-
ongoing case before court,
Yeah.
it would not be right to come in.
But
But I'm talking in general.
Yeah.
So it depends on how investigations are done,
And
how
impartial
how prosecutions are done,
Yeah.
what evidence is presented to court.
Right.
But as much as we, when I say we, as much as the public might want every single person convicted who is charged, the way our system, not only our system, the civilized world operates is you have to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt.
But
Yeah,
Sadia,
I-
recently we have seen so many acquittals on technicalities and all of that in major cases, mainly to do with politicians and
Yeah, but
people
then
related to
half
politicians.
of it is also, you do not see in the minor cases or not the high profile, the
Yeah.
normal cases also.
Same thing happens.
There are technical objections taken, acquittal, people are acquitted, people are convicted. But I do agree with you, public perception. There is a public perception
Yeah.
on this.
Right.
And the reason is, I think the biggest flaw in our country, in our criminal justice system, is the investigations. And that it boils down to the police, the bribery commission. So if investigations are flawed, when the cases come up to court, people get acquitted. So, and also, you must prosecute only cases where there is good evidence. In other countries, for instance, even in Japan, they prosecute only if they are certain, quite sure of a conviction. And some cases they decide, they use what is called prosecutorial discretion. They decide not to prosecute if the evidence is insufficient. So this is where I think here we have a tendency, each and every case is taken to the courts and indictments are sent. So one of the aspects of this is what we discuss, ongoing discussion is about the agency department. Whether you must have a separate institution or a department of public prosecutions to handle criminal cases, so that you split the role of the Attorney General. Because the Attorney General also advises the government that his criminal and prosecutorial role, whether it should be separated.
So it's not a conflict of
Yeah,
interest.
Yes.
I
That
just
is
want
being
to,
debated.
I just want to add on this because if you take, I mean, I'm not afraid of him, so I'm going to say his name. Tiranalas case, Rada case, everything came up, went to the courts, came, everything there. The witness came during the cross examination. I mean, during the first part of the this thing, and she was saying, I didn't see some of the documents. I mean, based on that very stance that the witness had not seen these documents and the original documents and so on and so on, Tiranalas got the case, he was discharged. I mean, this is
so we see a lot of instances
Again,
like
I would not want to comment on specific cases without knowing the
facts.
facts. I don't want to.
I mean, the thing is,
comment on
if the
specific
witnesses,
cases.
if the witnesses are backing down,
some emphasis on the police investigation. Now, as a public, and especially as activists. Now we saw just after the country was made bankrupt and basically the majority of it fled, Rajapaksa fled, and Basil Rajapaksa came back, through the VIP entrance. We saw the former police commissioner and his assistant going to welcome.
And he was
Not
commissioner at the
former,
time.
he was chairman.
He was
The chairman.
commissioner
No,
at the time.
Chandra Samman, I think. Yeah. Anyway, that time he was commissioner, yes.
Chairman.
Yeah, chairman. He and his assistant, they went to welcome him. That is that incident. So it's hard for us to, how do we, have much faith in the
faith in that particular side.
Let's leave that aside. It's just say that person has changed. Maybe there's somebody who's better now. But right now, for the IGP's position, we can see what the tussle that is happening. And the two front runners, one person is accused of not being able to prevent the Easter attacks. The other person, who's second in line to this position, is also not being able to prevent the Easter attacks, as well as he didn't prevent the attack on the unarmed protesters at Goa Face on I can't remember the date.
9th
Yeah,
of May.
9th of
May.
May. So I mean, these are the IGP, the Inspector General of Police. This is the type of caliber people who are in the front running for this position.
That's the
as
idea.
activists and as citizens. Forget activism, as citizens, how do we have faith in the police?
Yeah, so I do think that police reform has to be should be high on the agenda of any government, because unless you reform the police at many levels, police within I know there is a lot of discontent within the police over their promotions, appointments, so on. There are good officers who have been overlooked for promotions. We know the IGP admitted that after 9th of May, the IGP himself said most of the OICs are politically appointed. So he must be ashamed to say that, because he is the one who makes a recommendation to nominate. But the point is, I think the investigation skills, they are much lacking. Secondly, I think as law enforcement, I think the police really need to reform. The fact that we still cannot find, or the president has found that he's unable to appoint the Inspector General of Police. So we know that C.D. Vikramaratne's term was extended. Then it ended on the 26th of June. And for 2 weeks we did not have an IGP. Then
got him back.
Suddenly he was reappointed. Very questionable whether it could be done, but I suppose it was done in order to, obviously, to avoid someone else from being appointed. But I'm sure within the police force there are other people. There are other senior DIGs who are not controversial, who have a good track record. But
it must be very disheartening for those people.
Yeah.
Because it's so politicized.
It is.
Have to be
I think for instance, I know that the number of officers in charge of police station, they are sometimes they have to go behind the local politician to get the okay for their appointment.
So Sajid, we kept you for like an hour, 15 minutes already. So any questions, anything sort of that jumps, do you need clarity on from Zalia, from anything that we've discussed? So can I ask you a final question before we let Leisha talk about, because Leisha picks a quote for the week, something that she feels is appropriate in terms of what's happened this week. So, I feel we are in a very like an existential moment right now. We are kind of democracy is backsliding and so on. What do you feel is the biggest threat right now to our democracy as it stands right now in this moment? How do you see us coming out of this?
Yeah, okay. So I think the biggest threat is from when people see that authoritarianism is the answer to our problems. So I think it was on Twitter space which you were there when someone asked this question, saying we have our only option is between dictatorship and anarchy. So my answer is no, that there is a third way, and that is through a vibrant democracy.
Trust the process.
Yeah. So not necessarily trust the process, but what I say is you have to have a vibrant democracy And neither anarchy nor dictatorship is a solution. Because for those who say, we need a little bit of dictatorship, they're the same people who said that in 2019.
Yes, absolutely.
We need a benevolent dictator.
Yeah.
I don't think we need a benevolent dictator. We need, as Mark Fernandez in one of the judgments has said, people elect someone not to govern, but rather to serve. So that should be the concept.
Yeah.
And I think we must promote this, that Sri Lanka must be a vibrant democracy.
Yeah.
That is where, one thing I must say, I still believe Sri Lanka, I still believe that Sri Lanka is still a democracy with all its flaws. And because that is why we can be here, we can speak this way. And, but there are challenges. So the challenge to that is this perception of that authoritarianism is a way out.
Thank you, Salia. I mean, I think, with the, we were a group that was inspired by the Argala, and what was such a big draw for us was the prospect of system change, of changing this kind of very toxic political culture and all of that. So, which is kind of why we are still doing this, because we feel we are a long way from, getting to that point. So, whether it happens in our lifetime or it takes longer, so we will continue to speak out, and we hope, people like you, or we need more people like you in the public sphere to actually champion these causes that people are fighting for. So thank you so much, Sali, for joining us. So let me leave it to Lisha to
So this week I had two quotes. I couldn't decide between the two. Both are from Nelson Mandela. One is, a nation should not be judged by how it treats its highest citizens, but its lowest ones. I mean, Fedo India, Fedo DDR, right? And the second one is actually directly, I think the way the president is running this country. You will achieve more in this world through acts of mercy than you will through acts of retribution. Because I think there's a lot of revenge going on. This burning of his house, my God, I think virtually everybody in this country has been taken up. Sorry,
Right.
you must not, but I just felt that was...
No, absolutely. I mean,
It's being spoken of by him overseas also.
Yes, so he keeps bringing it up constantly.
But on the 40th, on the day of, there was nothing. On the day of Black July.
So yeah, I mean,
Burning
we're
of
going to talk
Catalonia.
over you a bit, Salia. But yeah, on the day of Black July, the 40th anniversary, which is a significant day,
Silence.
there was absolutely no
Not
official
silence
form of
about this.
commemoration.
But he was
with Buddhist priests. I shared that.
You shared that.
He
Number
spent the
of
day with Buddhist priests. Yeah. So
he was talking
that is
about
the
I'm not Rajapaksa and Vikramasinghe.
right. So that is the state of the political sort of playing field right now, sadly. But Sali, we're very grateful for the time that you spent with us. It's been very enlightening, and I think we followed you with great interest. So I think we are very happy that you came today. Chris, do you want to do the?
Is that time?
Is that
Okay, I'll just say something that maybe just one or two I'll just say.
Yeah.
Sari, something you said sometime before was the wheels of justice will turn. It takes time to turn, but it surely will. But just one or two of these things I'll read. There's a long list here that we don't have time for that. I'll just read one or two things.
we like to remind people why we keep doing this.
I'll just and where I say it's difficult to agree with what you said. I'm sorry, but it's difficult to agree with what you said for simple reasons like this. Okay? Minister Diana Gamage, she's not a citizen of Sri Lanka, as confirmed by the Controller of Immigration.
The ongoing cases.
Okay.
No,
we are not asking you to
Because also, from your point of view,
Yes.
also on discussion of ongoing cases, it put you in a spot.
Okay. Okay. All right.
So I don't think you should take ongoing cases.
All right. Okay.
Because that would be
All
something.
right.
Okay, someone will report.
All right.
Take the. So I would not advise.
Okay,
that.
all right. Then the bond scam, which happened and has a value of 12 billion rupees. The sugar scam, 15.9 billion rupees. That's just two things. Richard D'Souza's death in 1990. Lasantha Wickramatunga's killing in 2009. Then we have how different politicians are treated when they have an encounter with the police. Gajan Ponnambalam was arrested for an argument with a plainclothes CID officer who refused to identify himself. But Jeevan Thondaman, who threatened a police officer with death, there's no action against him. Then Lohan Ratpatha was found guilty by the commission report of many crimes. This is an unauthorized entry into the barricaded police. Yet the police spokesman says he cannot be arrested unless the cabinet gives permission. So when you see things like this, these are just a few. There's no time to read everything.
Yeah.
Right.
But just a few of the things.
Right.
So it's hard to what shall I say, have faith
Yeah,
in what you said.
because equal justice is one of those things that we
Right.
constantly keep talking about, because we don't see the application of the law in that way.
No, so as I told you at the beginning, I for one moment I don't say our system is perfect. It's perfect, or our system is obviously flawed. Is flawed, and that is why we have to work towards rectifying that. Whether that will happen now, 5 years, 10 years, we do not know. But why I said that was, I have seen this, that there are some people who, especially related to police officers, I have seen sometimes how police officers who have acted with impunity, how they have ultimately ended up. Right? I don't want to give exact names, but we have seen that happening. I have seen how, there are police officers who are involved in disappearances, so on. How later on, years later, they were made accountable. Some of them had to face cases, some of them were convicted, so on. So that is why I say that sometimes it might look as if it's going slowly, but there will be a time for these people to be accountable. Of course, that is not to say that, again, as you say, give the examples which you gave, there are many unresolved crimes. So Lasantha Vikramathure's killing, we know that there was a lot of investigations done by the CID.
The Pradeep Ekdali's disappearance.
Yes, so that there is an ongoing case. There is an ongoing case. Yeah. So, but the point is, at the same time, there are people who have been held accountable. But certainly, I totally agree with you that the system, there is much work to be done and much to be improved. And I, as I said earlier, I think public confidence is important for the justice sector, and I do believe that those who are involved in the justice sector, whether it be the defense, the prosecutors, or the judicial or the investigators, must keep that in mind. That, in fact, the Supreme Court website refers to public confidence. I think that is absolutely
Great. Thank you, Sali. So on that note, I think we'll wrap it up. So let's hope that the arc of Sri Lankan history bends towards justice. Right? And if you're hopeful, then we can be hopeful too. So thank you to the GGY team who's here. Thank you to Salia, Anu, CK, Chiranta as always. So that's a wrap for day 206 at GGY. We'll be back at our usual street corner on Sunday for 207 outside Health Guard on Tibrikasai Road, and we'll be back here next Wednesday, maybe with a guest, maybe not, we'll see. I don't know how we can top having Salia here, right? So thank you so much for joining us on day 206, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.